Joined by my friend, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is announcing today a brand new book by Mike Pompeo is out, Never Give an Inch. Actually, it's not out. It is announced. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. How the heck are you?
I am great. I fancy myself a pretty good giver of titles. I helped Sarah Huckabee Sanders come up with Speaking My Mind. I don't think I could have come up with a better title for a book than Never Give an Inch for Mike Pompeo.
Well, thanks. Look, it tells some stories about the work that we did that, frankly, just no one wants to tell, and so it was important to recount that history. I think there's a little bit of humor because I was a CI director. There's some pretty exciting, good stuff in there too, and I hope everybody will go take a look at it and enjoy reading it. I think it's a lot of fun to read through and tells the story of how we put the American people first.
Now, I want to go through how never give an inch philosophy will apply to Putin, Xi, and to Iran. But first, I've just got to ask you about what Nikki Haley said to me on Thursday, which made a little bit of news in my head because I thought it was wrong. She was talking about moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And, of course, I'm glad Donald Trump did that. And I recalled you were a supporter of that. And she said, oh, no, Mike didn't support that. You can ask Mike. So I'm asking you, Mr. Secretary, I thought you supported that.
Of course I did.
Well, of course I did.
I was a CI director at the time. No, it was a complicated problem set. I had real responsibilities as a CI director to make sure that we did everything right in the run up to that, so that we could be in place to support the decision the president intended to make. But of course, made perfect sense to me, and you can see the work I did more publicly as a Secretary of State to know that there's no greater supporter of the Jewish homeland and the Israeli people's right to live in Judea, Samaria, and all of Israel, and that their capital ought to be in Jerusalem.
Well, I thought that was maybe the first elbow thrown by the former UN ambassador in what might be the 2024 debates, but we will return to that. Now, let me take Never Give an Inch and ask, how does that fit with Pipe Hitter, which is the cavpack.com link? I love your language. Who comes up with the title Never Give an Inch, by the way? Who gets the credit for
that? Sadly, that's all me, Hugh. And my son has heard that so many times. And, Hugh, it's not about the fact that there aren't places where one can find accommodation, place to compromise, but on the things that matter, on the central idea of we win, they lose, as Reagan used to put it, on the central idea of you have to deter the bad guys with the enormous might of the American nation, not just our military might, but our economic power, our diplomatic tools. On those things that really matter, you have to be very clear. And once you start to give, Hugh, you know the story. The bad guys will drive a truck through weakness.
Never Give an Inch, coming out in January. We will talk about it in detail when it does. Now, let me turn to the headlines. Vladimir Putin is warning this morning that he will continue his retaliatory missile strikes on Ukraine. And he's killed hundreds of people in strikes on apartment buildings. They're war crimes in retaliation for the destruction of the bridge that, really hit him in his ego because he put a lot into building that bridge from Russia to Crimea. What does Never Give an Inch theory mean right now vis-a-vis Putin? What do you want to hear the president say?
Well, first thing I wanted to do is stop going to fundraisers and talking about Armageddon. Imagine John Kennedy going to a Democrat fundraiser saying, hey, Khrushchev's moving some missiles into Cuba. Can you send me a check? It's just reckless and dangerous. Putin hears that, too. Never giving an inch there means continuing to support the Ukrainian people with all the tools they need, not half measures, not slow, not delivering 4 HIMARS when you can put 20 in place, all of the things that will bring this to a closure. And closure looks like Vladimir Putin making the decision in his own mind that the risk, the cost is too great. He has to perceive that risk. This is the traditional notion of peace through strength that Ronald Reagan executed for 4 years, prevented Putin from doing exactly what he did a couple of months after I left office. This is exactly the model that delivers for America and the American people, and we ought to get back at it without risk. The Biden administration always just talks about we risk antagonizing him as provoking him. I think he's been provoked, you, and what they need is leadership that demonstrates real resolve. And if you give an inch, Putin will launch more rockets, kill more Ukrainians, and frankly disrupt Europe through a winter that's going to be an incredibly difficult one.
Now, Mr. Secretary, I noted, I was talking with General Kellogg in the Fox screen room 2 weeks ago, and General Kellogg, big fan of yours, obviously, was telling me the one thing you never do is ration artillery. You push the artillery into the first phase of the battle, and we have been dribbling out artillery, especially the HIMARS. Would you recommend we just open the floodgates at this point? Because there's no point in supporting Zelensky at 30%.
This has been my core critique. So I applaud the Biden administration for keeping Europe together as long as they have and urging the Europeans to do more. But we have been just slow and late and short. Right? To your point, that's what I talked about HIMARS before. We should be delivering them all of the equipment that they're asking for. They haven't asked for our kits. They haven't asked for our soldiers, our Marines. They've simply asked us to provide them the tools they need, and they'll do the fighting. And when they do, when Putin can see that they're going to have the resources they need quickly and powerfully, this is much more likely to bring this fighting to a close than what Biden has done to date.
I couldn't agree more, and I hope somebody is listening from Team Biden. Let me turn to Taiwan. I asked Ambassador Haley if she's been. She has not, and I think it's sort of incumbent on people who want to lead the Republican Party to visit Taiwan. I know you've been there. What did you find when you went there?
So, Hugh, I've now been there twice since leaving office. I found that people that are prepared to protect their freedom, their sovereignty, they love the fact that they get a chance to make decisions for themselves. They are demonstrably showing that democracy can work in a culture like theirs. This is what she's story is. No, the only way for our culture to survive is authoritarian Marxism, and Taiwan stands as a beacon that refutes that. Their economy is strong. Their people are strong. What they need is an America that is prepared not only to provide them the tools that they're asking for, which the administration has again refused to do at this moment, the most important moment. And we also need to continue to round up the allies, the friends, the South Koreans, the Australians, the Japanese, and make sure that they understand the risk that extends not just to Taiwan, but to them as well. And when we do, we'll prevail.
There's another bipartisan CODEL landing in Taiwan during this congressional recess, and I'm very glad that it's going. But I do want everyone who would be president now or in the future to visit Taiwan. And I just think you can't understand the defense of an island until you see it. Am I right about that, Mr. Secretary?
You're right about that, Hugh. And on my last trip, I guess 3 weeks ago now, I got out of Taipei. I met with the government officials, but I got out of Taipei to meet with ordinary Taiwanese citizens and the business community, including those folks that are involved in the manufacture of semiconductors, wafers for semiconductors, something that matters an awful lot to every American all across our country. And this is another place, right? The subtitle of the book, Never Give an Inch, is Fighting for an America I Love. If you are prepared to fight for the America you love, you have to make sure that the resources we need are available to drive our cars, to use our phones, to live our lives in freedom. And supporting Taiwan is deeply connected to American security and American prosperity. And I hope that every American leader who wants to understand the Pacific threat, the threat from the Chinese Communist Party, will go to Taiwan and meet the Taiwanese leadership and its people.
To the great shame of America, Joe Biden has said nothing himself about yet another massacre of Iranians by the mullahs. President Obama, of course, shamefully silent during the Green Revolution. It's happening again. 185 at least Iranians have been murdered in the last 2 weeks, 19 of them children. What should the United States be saying and doing right now about Iran, Mike Pompeo?
Well, go look at what I did and what President Trump did for 4 years. When the Iranians people were rising up, we supported them with every tool we had available. Most importantly, our voices, our willingness to demonstrate that we were with the Iranian people and throwing off the regime that terrorizes not only them, but Israel, our allies in the Middle East, and our own nation. You can see they're trying to kill senior leaders here in the United States. This is serious business, and the Biden administration's silence, and worse yet, sitting at the table offering them $7 billion worth of instantaneous economic relief is deeply dangerous, and to me, Hugh, absolutely incomprehensible in the face of the Iranian people who just want the chance to have a government that reflects their understanding of the world.
I'm so glad you said that because we always say markets are forward-looking. So are dictators. And when dictators know $7 billion's coming their way, or whatever trillion, whatever the number is, they act accordingly. And now they're raining down missiles on Kurdistan. Let me close. We got a minute, Mr. Secretary. Never give an inch. That means you've been out there fighting for every inch on the Republican map. How do you feel about the red wave, which I think is forming?
I think it's great. It's not even just red. People from Democrats, independents, they can all see that their lives are worse off today as a result of Joe Biden. My book talks about that, too. You can go to MikePompeo.com and pre-order the book. It talks about how the weakness abroad impacts us here at home, whether that's higher gas prices because the world decided the Green New Deal was more important than actually taking care of people, We can do it. We can get this right. I'm very confident we will, and November will be a big success for the country.
MikePompeo.com. Go pre-order Never Give an Inch. Also stop by CavPack.com. Help him close the final segment for Republicans across the United States. Never Give an Inch at MikePompeo.com. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll be right back, America.